You realize we're almost into October. Tomorrow, I mark 9 full months on the job. I just was talking to Suzanne's brother on the telephone yesterday, and I remarked about that to him. And I've only been out of Idaho twice, and only once overnight since I started the job. So I guess that tells you how much I'm enjoying it. 8:33, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 50. Also, we get into this time of year, we start talking about putting some steaks and some, ground meat and things like that into your freezer. Going to be a long winter. High Desert Meat Processing processes one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you're going to get back. Darren Van Horn, owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls. He's got more than 30 years experience in the meat business. You can visit him on Facebook, High Desert Meat Processing, and read reviews. Give High Desert Meat Processing a call for all of your wild game, but also your domestic needs, 734-9949. Nothing is shipped out. It's all done in-house. Specialty meats, jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa, breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, more as well. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. Telephone number 734-9949. Steve Millington joining us this morning. He's not in studio, though. He's joining us by telephone. And we've got to mention, you're a busy, busy man. That's why, of course, when you're running a local Republican Party, there's no rest for the weary. Welcome back. Is Steve with us this morning? Oh, you know what I got to do, Steve? I'll put you back on hold for a minute. My telephone does this rather goofy thing. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Ah, that's much better. I can hear you now. This sounds like a commercial from an old cell phone company. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Also, I think from the early days of the Tea Party.
Yeah, right.
Hey, speaking of that, it looks as if the conservatives who rode that Tea Party wave 5 years ago, with Boehner on his way out, they're going to have a big say in who's going to replace this guy. Am I right?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One of them is this is an extraordinary event to have a sitting speaker step down. They change frequently, but normally that's when the percentage, the ownership of the House changes from one political party to the other political party. But in this situation, a current seated speaker to step down and let somebody else try to take over. Very interesting indeed. Now, the conservatives, the real tight Tea Party type guys, do not have enough votes to initiate a nominee for speaker. However, they have enough votes to determine who actually gets that chair. And so if they get together and vote as a bloc, which apparently they're going to do, that's one of the things that caused John Boehner to say, I can't win this unless I have all of the help of the Democrats, which puts him in a very awkward position because how does he become Speaker of the House as a Republican when, in fact, the Democrats are the ones who voted him in? So it put him in a between a rock and a hard place where there was no way to get around managing or controlling that particular body of people.
Steve, I'm a little concerned about Boehner because I think, despite those conservatives, he would actually get the votes of the Democrats to put a new speaker in place.
I do too, and I think that part of the problem is that the Republicans can see that he really is working well with the Democrat side, maybe too well. Maybe that's their concern. He's spending too much time working with the Democrats and not enough time working with Republicans. And so they could just simply block his election, and he would become worse than a lame duck, if you will, because he simply would have no control, no authority. So now the conservatives will probably throw their weight behind someone else. Apparently the front runner is a guy named Kevin McCarthy.
He's a Californian, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe he is from California. That's right. But he is the current majority leader in the House. And so it's kind of a progression, if you will. We have to pay our dues, and then we get our tenure, and we get our rank and privilege, and then we get to go up from there. So there's a good chance that McCarthy will become the Speaker of the House. Then there's two other positions that have to be filled. Now, this is not the way the Constitution set it up, but it's the rules of order that exist in the House of Representatives. We always have a majority leader, and that cannot be the same person as the Speaker of the House. So now we're looking for a new majority leader, and lots of names have been tossed around, and nobody's really all that powerful. However, the Conservatives could vote as a bloc and see to it that they got the man they wanted, not because they could elect him on a head count, but rather they could defeat the people they don't want, because they could vote as a bloc against them, and they wouldn't have enough votes to elect them.
There's got to be a compromise then between the two groups.
And that's what we kind of are looking at here, is how do we create this compromise? Number one, we've got to elect a speaker. Number two, now when we get the speaker elected, that's pretty much a total House situation. Democrats can vote their way, the Republicans can vote their way, and if we keep all of the different factions within the Republican group together, then they can elect their person. When we get to something called the majority leader and the majority whip, that is purely the Republican members of the House. The Democrats do exactly the same thing. I think, if memory serves me right, Nancy Pelosi is still the minority leader.
She is.
In the House.
We've got to take a short break, Steve. Hold your thoughts on that, because a very prominent Idahoan who happens to serve in a district outside of ours was on Sean Hannity's program last night with some thoughts about this. So we'll get your comments on that in just a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Steve Millington joining us this morning on Top Story. It's 8:40. Steve is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. It's 51. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we are 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock. I just looked up on our TV monitor, and there's Fonzie trying to sell us a reverse mortgage. How does that happen? Here's a guy who played a tough guy on TV for years, and then in a matter of a few decades, he's one of the most mild-mannered TV pitchmen around, and people accept him in that role as well. Our guest, who's joining us this morning, is a little too young to remember the ducktail haircuts. Steve Millington was still in diapers at the time. 8:43, Bill Colley with you as well this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 51. Steve is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. I think I put you in the right age group.
Yes, I think maybe you're being very kind to me. I do remember the ducktail haircuts and but yeah, I was just had to think about it real hard to catch up on that one.
My mother told me, well, she said she knew no one like that, even though she was growing up in that era, but she was in a very small town, and so they didn't have that. And then one of my school teachers told us when the TV show Happy Days was on, he was upset that the kids liked that Fonzie character, and he said, "Let me tell you something. Those people were the scum of the earth."
Yeah, they were the kind of the outliers, if you will.
We don't have those teachers anymore, but it's kind of a shame. Anyway, we were talking a little bit about John Boehner stepping down as the chairman of the, or rather a speaker of the House of Representatives, and this rush that's on now, really not for his job as speaker. People think it's going to be Kevin McCarthy, as you mentioned. But who's going to be, because the party then selects its other officers, that is, the majority leader and the whip. Last night, Raul Labrador was on Sean Hannity's program, and his name got mentioned in a publication called The Hill over the weekend. He's Latino, he's Mormon, he's young. Do you think he's got much of a chance?
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting observation. However, I have in my hand this morning, I I probably shouldn't say this because it'll kind of give me away. I am reading this morning a Wyoming-based newspaper. And this newspaper is saying, so who takes over the position as the majority leader in the House of Representatives? And they had it narrowed down to, I'm sure this is off of a news wire, but they narrowed it down to Jim Jordan of Ohio or a fellow by the name of Raul Labrador of Idaho.
Wow.
And as I read that, I thought to myself, that's pretty heady stuff.
Well,
and you're right. Number one, he is Latino, and that would go a long ways. Labrador is a political person. You know, he's in politics. What do you expect?
he's a brilliant politician.
But he is really, to listen to him speak and to watch him. I have been in situations where I watched him make a really catastrophic error and it was an unrecoverable situation, but he handled it the best he could. And when the final bell rung, he said, "That's the motion on the floor, and that's not debatable, and that ends. We're done. Go home." And he didn't like it any more than most of the other people there, but he recovered from a state party standpoint quite well from that. He is one of the members that we would consider to be part of the, quote, Tea Party caucus or group, the strongly conservative side. And as such, this group of conservative guys who really don't have enough votes to initiate an action, but they do have plenty of strength to prohibit or to vote against an action. He gathers them up and keeps them in a group, and they vote Kevin McCarthy in as the new speaker. People are going to look around and say, okay, Labrador is one of these guys that can keep all of these conservative fellows in camp.
How do you think
on the right track?
How do you think it would impact his relationship with Mike Simpson? Because Mike Simpson has been in this role a lot longer and was a Boehner ally. Do you think that it would perhaps change Mike Simpson's approach, or would it make life more difficult between our two members of the House?
That's an interesting question. Let's go back to point number one. Simpson has always been a great supporter of John Boehner and has had Boehner's ear on a lot of issues. And as a result of Boehner stepping down, I wonder in the back of my mind, I wonder if this is going to have an impact on Mike Simpson's influence and standing in the House of Representatives.
Especially if Labrador. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
If Labrador becomes, if he doesn't get the majority chair, majority leader, I'm sorry, wrong word. If he does not get the majority leader position, there is still going to be a majority whip position. And if he gets either one of those two positions, he is going to have leapfrogged way past Mike Simpson in just kabang. That could put a little strain, a little stress on the working relationship between the two. However, most of us in the country, most of us here in Idaho, we're not going to see that because in the public face, they're going to be pretty much lined up one behind the other or side by side. Occasionally, we're going to see them on divergent sides of the road. However, Simpson's influence and position could be diminished by John Boehner leaving his position. Now, the bigger question I have, I haven't read this at all, is Boehner going to run for re-election, or is he going to just hang it up?
Yeah, he's hanging it. That's what surprised me. You know, he just decided he's done. I could see stepping back from the lead role, but just he's done. It really shocked me. Well,
I'm out of here. Back to.
Well, here's a thought about Labrador. I got an email from his office Thursday last week. So this was a day before the announcement broke about Boehner, and the email said that the congressman would be willing to do a regular weekly feature on the air with us, and he's already, I guess, going to be launching this over in Idaho Falls and Pocatello. So in other words, all of the three radio markets in the heart of Mike Simpson's district, you'll have Raul Labrador on the air. So I wonder if he had an inkling of what Boehner was doing the day before, And then the following day, with Boehner's resignation announcement, I wrote back the press guy at Labrador's office and said, when can we get him on the air to talk about this? And they said, won't be anytime soon. So they've gone from, can we do that weekly segment? We can't do it in the first few days following the resignation of Mr. Boehner. And I wonder if that's because he's going to keep his mouth somewhat closed with the people here in Idaho until a decision is made on the leadership.
I think that's probably a good point. There's an old adage that's called, let's let the sleeping dog lie. And I think maybe he wants to just back off and leave it alone until we get done with the reorganization of the House of Representatives. And once that's behind him, then he will probably be a lot more willing to step up and be involved. I find it interesting that not only does he hit the Boise market, but the Twin Falls market and the Idaho Falls market.
Yeah.
That's where could that be leading him, so to speak?
Well, if he ends up as majority leader, we've been speculating that he'd like to move on to the Senate if one of the other fellows decides to, that they're done, or that he'd like to move on to the governor's office. But if you end up as majority leader, I don't know how you could walk away so easily from the House of Representatives. It's such a prestigious job.
That is exactly right. And when I read those articles, I thought to myself, wow, all of these conversations that have occurred that say, oh, gee, we're going to let him, he wants to take over one of the senator chairs, or maybe he wants to come back and run for governor, not if he is the majority leader in the House of Representatives. That's not to say that it's impossible. It just puts a different twist on it that, you're walking away from a very prestigious position.
I just had an email from someone out in the Rupert area who alleges that McCarthy is just going to be a carbon copy of Boehner.
Well, and many of the conservative people, and I guess I'd have to put myself in that same wagon. My question is, okay, McCarthy, what really are you going to do? Do you have enough resolve? And do the conservative members of the House have enough resolve that they can pass these pieces of legislation that basically say, this is what we're going to do, and this is the way we're going to pass it, and Mr. Obama, if you don't like it, you veto it. You go on record and tell the whole country, I vetoed this. For example, the shutdown of the government. We are going to run out of money. I think it's Thursday night or what day is it? I think
October 1st, right?
Yeah, we're out of money. We either have to refund this thing or we shut the government down. Well, shutting the government down doesn't really frighten me in the least, because last time we shut the government down, nothing changed. All of the government and federal government employees that suddenly didn't go to work, the non-essential people that didn't go to work, they sat home and caught up on the soap operas on the television. And the day they went back to work, they got all of their pay for the days that they were, quote, furloughed, unquote. Yeah. Now, in the rest of the world, if we had non-essential employees, they would be called unemployed, but not at government. So, shutting down the government, noise, blah, blah. No. Shut it down. Let's get what we want and shut it down. If Obama is willing to shut down the government because we defund Planned Parenthood, then let's make sure that everybody knows that at the very same time that he shut down the government because of Planned Parenthood funding, he also shut down food stamps for 47 million Americans. Let's make it known. You would rather have abortions than food stamps?
Hey, Steve, we've got a telephone caller. I'm going to try to get to our caller for a moment here.
Okay.
It's 8:54. Steve Millington joining us. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, and he's joining us this morning. 52 right now, 6 minutes from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you, too, as well on Top Story. And our caller is with us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. It's interesting that Representative Simpson says it's just this minority Tea Party that he hates so much, but yet 62% of Republican voters feel betrayed by leadership. And so it's not just a few Tea Party people out there that are opposed, or Boehner and, of course, Simpson and Boehner both have voted for, illegal amnesty funding and Obamacare funding, and that upset a lot of my friends, including myself. And but for him to just say that is ridiculous, because we need a leadership change, and McCarthy's not going to be the one that's going to get the job done. I'm afraid he's a carbon copy of what we've already got.
Hey, your comment on that, Steve?
Well, I mentioned that. I'm not sure he's quite as conservative as I would want to have, but if we look at the practical, we have to be pragmatic. Okay, McCarthy's probably going to be as conservative as we're going to get under the current status. The conservative members of the House have determined in their mind that they cannot get their person elected as Speaker of the House, but voting as a block, they can control who ultimately sits in that chair. And given the fact that they have bad choice of words here, but let me just use it anyway, they have overthrown the Speaker of the House. Can any of us recall in memory where that has happened previously? The Speaker of the House changes when we have a change of party leadership in the House. If the Democrats take over, we change Speaker. The Republicans take over, we change Speaker. We seldom have had a Speaker stand down because of a mutiny within the ranks.
Well, you've got some state party chairmen now who are saying it's time for Mitch McConnell to go. I was reading that. Yeah, the fact that chairman of the Louisiana Republican Party, I think, is the longest tenured state chairman of the country, and he said it's time for McConnell to get out of the way and get this thing wrapped up and finally take a stand.
And our caller was right. We need to have people who have a little bit more resolve and a little bit more determination, and that's why I say, if you're gonna shut down the government over this budget issue, defund, and somebody needs to have enough wherewithal to stand right up to the microphones and say, we are not going to continue to provide funds for Planned Parenthood. The states can find alternative organizations to fund women's health care in their various states without this horrible thing hanging around our neck. And by the way, if the Democrats vote against this, then it should be time for everybody to understand that they are more in favor of providing and supporting abortions than they are in paying for the food stamp funding to feed 47 million people in America.
Well, I'll tell you what, on that note, I've got to let you go. We'll talk to you again next week. I think you're back in the studio.
Yep, that's the plan. The next week we will do a face-to-face deal. Right. Hey, Bill, thanks a million. I sure appreciate visiting with you and all of our listeners out there. Y'all have a great week.
Hey, you too. Thank you. Steve Millington joining us this morning. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Joins us on Tuesday mornings between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Got one more hour of the show coming up. Speaking of Raul Labrador, I'll share with you what he had to say on Hannity's program last night, but it looks as if he may well be stepping up into a very powerful role in Washington. Details ahead following 9 o'clock news from Fox.